someone asked him a question, how can I focus in prayer? And he said, well, first you have to learn to focus outside prayer before you can learn to focus in prayer. And it got me thinking, in the Persian Gulf, they had a tradition of pearl diving, right? And what did pearl divers do? They had to hold their breath, put a nose clip on, and dive deep. And when they went deep, they found the pearls. So your cognitive functions are very much like that. You have to remove the noise in order to dive deep. And when you dive deep, your brain is full of jewels. Great creative minds think like artists, but work like accountants. So yes, you can envision something, but to deliver it, you have to cross the I's, do the T's, right? And that's the craft. So creativity is about two things. It's about the art, an idea, and then it's about the craft. It's the diligence. Somewhere in the world, there is a doorway for each of us, and we just don't know where that is and when it's going to come, right? But when you realize that that doorway is waiting to open for you at some point, then that should give you the urgency to say, right, I need to do it. I need to make use of this next moment.
Rehan Khan, welcome to the In Good Faith podcast.
Thank you so much, Iqbal. It's lovely to connect with you, and especially location-wise, we're in a place that we're not normally, right?
We are outside our normal environment, and once upon a time, our normal environment was Southwest London.
That's right.
And viewers and listeners should probably know that I could probably regard you as one of my very first, teachers outside of sort of family and just outside of, I don't know, like the local imam or something. So all my deviations since then, I can place at your door.
Exactly. Well, I think I've known you since you were about 8 years of age,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
it was in South London, Wimbledon, Tooting, that area. And there used to be a madrasa which Sabiha auntie used to run,
Mm-hmm.
and your mother obviously used to run as well. So they very kindly asked me to come and teach the boys.
Mm.
And you were one of the boys.
I was one of
Star performer in the class, though.
Oh, thank you.
Top of the class. And she be top since then, Iqbal.
No, too kind, too kind. Thank you so much. But yeah, for the last 20 years or so, you left the UK for for a brighter future, and that future seems to have still becoming brighter by the day. It's been really nice to observe the really interesting journey that you've had, and one of the things that in my own work I've gone on about over the years is people really, I suppose, not just getting lost in the corporate sort of rat race and actually finding a sense of purpose and trying, where possible, to actually find avenues, either on the side or even as a replacement to conventional work, as a way to um, fully express themselves and bring forward the special gifts that they've been uniquely given. And you seem to have been able to do that with increasing momentum and abundance, and that's been really, really, really nice to see. Um, there's a number of things that you can speak about and therefore would like to speak about today. You're probably right now most famous or known for your uh, prolific novel writing and what you call sort of virtue-based storytelling. And I definitely want to come to that, but I want to park that and leave that more towards the end, because the other areas where you've done some thinking, some work, some writing as well, uh, is probably in an area which um, is really being talked about a lot nowadays, which is to do with AI, technology generally speaking, this thing called the singularity, which some people seem to want to welcome, but seems scary to me. And then related to that, although I think you started, before that, writing about this issue of distraction and our inability to manage our attention in an effective way. And all of these things seem interlinked now. And actually, the more crazy the technology gets, obviously the attention, focus, distraction issues become much more significant. So maybe let's start there. Just where we are right now, how would you characterize what the problem is? How could a viewer or listener, what would you say such that a viewer or listener could really think to themselves, like, do I have an attention problem?
Yeah, it's a very common problem, right? People can't seem to concentrate and focus at work or concentrate and focus in their home environment. And what really prompted me was one of my teachers where he said that someone asked him a question, how can I focus in prayer? And he said, well, first you have to learn to focus outside prayer before you can learn to focus in prayer. And it got me thinking and got me, path down this path where I thought, well, I feel that my own the quality of the output that I produce as a knowledge worker, as a subject matter expert, I felt there was a diminishment in the quality of what I was producing. And so I was thinking, what's going on? Whether I was doing a deep financial model in the corporate sector, whether I was writing a report, I kept wanting, I had this itch to go and, oh, I want to do something else. So I started looking at that and I thinking, well, actually, no, there is seems to be a common problem here that we all seem to be just, distracting ourselves to death, really, in everything that we do. There's a problem around attention. And when you transpose that from just your corporate life or your work life or your personal life to a bigger question, then it becomes, am I moving towards God or am I moving away from God?
Mm,
Right.
mm.
And so if we can't manage our attention, then there's so many things that are moving us away from God. And, like the late Neil Postman, who was an NYU professor who famously wrote Amusing Ourselves to Death, he said that whenever we bring any technology out, there are two questions we should ask. What problem will it solve? And what problems will it create? And so I started thinking about if I let technology into my life in any way, whatever it might be, it could be an app, it could be some new hardware, then is that going to draw me closer to God or is it going to move me away from God?
Hmm.
Right. So I think there's definitely a problem which everyone feels, even in their family life when they're with their kids, like they're only kind of partially present. Right. So there's obviously a lot more we can say, but I think that's what got me started in that the question of focus and the question of am I orbiting closer to God or am I moving away? And that obviously has a bigger, we can talk about that.
Even for relatively conscientious people, one of the concerns about not being in social media and technology and the news cycle is this fear of being uninformed. So there's almost like this obsession, like, but I won't know what's going on. I don't wonder if you can speak to that specifically because this seems to be one of the kind of pushbacks that comes, seeming well, feels like it's kind of a well-intended one. People obviously recognize the problem, but it's like, would they be being almost irresponsible, right, by just not knowing what's going on?
I think there's a couple of things. Number one is that if you don't watch the news for a month and you switch it on, it's the same, right? I guarantee you nothing much has changed. Similar kind of problems. The way the news is packaged up is very similar. However, what I would say, look, if your job is that you are a community leader, you are an activist, you are constantly out there facing Q&A, then of course you need to be informed. You're a politician, you're a mayor or something. Of course, 100%. But then if you're in that position of responsibility, you have people who are your staff who will keep you up to date. But for the normal kind of person or, who's involved in arts or craft or being looking after their kids, right? Or going to work, you don't really need to know. Yeah. And I guarantee you, if you just maybe, for example, say you have a problem right now, you want to keep checking the news every hour. Okay. Maybe just reduce it to 3 times a day. Okay. And see if it changes anything that you know.
That seems like a lot.
Yeah. Then reduce it to twice a day. Yeah. And then reduce it to once a day, right? If you still think you need to do it. And then you reduce it gradually to twice,
Mm,
once every 2 days. And you'll find that actually there's not much you need to know because the way the news is very much written, it's that kind of dopamine effect, right? Whereas if you actually want to be informed, then that's something different. That's you have to learn at your own pace, right? And so, yes, we are informed about content at the shallow level, but we don't seem to have insight at a deep level, and in the Persian Gulf, they had a tradition of pearl diving, right? And what did pearl divers do? They had to hold their breath, put a nose clip on, and dive deep. And when they went deep, they found the pearls. So your cognitive functions are very much like that. You have to remove the noise in order to dive deep. And when you dive deep, your brain is full of jewels because you've been exposed to so many things, right? But you can't make the connections unless basically you let your mind rest. And what happens essentially, new neural pathways form in the brain when your mind is resting. That's why you get your best ideas. You're in the shower, you're out for a walk. You're not receiving. You're not in receiving mode,
mm.
and then boom, an idea happens. And then you look at the loss of creativity, whether it's, oh, they just made another film of that, which they made 20 years ago, or they put another this one coming out, or same old cartoon, same old, same old, same old. So I do feel that there's been a massive loss of quality, And as the late philosopher and scholar René Gunon wrote many years ago, a book called The Reign of Quantity. And he said, we live in a time where there's a reign of quantity, right? But we're losing quality. So I think you have to ask yourself, what do I need to do? Do I need to make a quality informed, insightful decision? Then I just step back. But of course, if you're a community leader, then you obviously have to be informed.
Mm. Um, there's two strands of what you said, which maybe I want to connect to, maybe see if you can comment on this. So you spoke on the one hand around, proximity to God, distance from God, and then separately this kind of loss of quality and loss of creativity. And I was wondering if you could speak about how actually the where somebody is in their creative potential is almost, or would you agree that that's almost like a sign of maybe how close to God they are or not?
Not
Okay.
necessarily, not necessarily. Now, I think there's a couple of things to unpack here. Number one is that some people sometimes they say, I'm not creative. I'm just like a STEM person. Yeah. Alhamdulillah. That's great. That's totally fine. Yeah. But people think that creativity is just kind of like, magic spice that you just do it and just put out there. And someone said, you know, uh, great creative minds think like artists, but work like accountants.
Hmm.
Okay. So yes, you can envision something, but to deliver it, you have to cross the I's, do the T's, right? And that's the craft. So creativity is about two things. It's about the art and idea. Yeah. And then it's about the craft. It's the diligence, right? And so the number of people who come to me who say, I've got this great idea for a novel, Rehan. I know how it begins. I know how it ends. Okay. I'm not sure about the middle part. They give up because when they realize how much hard work it is, and the same thing with painting, with calligraphy. So I think creativity is something yes, you need a bit of a spark. Yeah. And that comes by being able to make connections. That's why I say if you want to be more creative, look at what you are receiving. And just as bad food, junk food is bad for your body, so the content is bad for your soul,
Mm.
right? So if you want your soul to connect to God, you need to nourish it in the way. And our scholars, tell us that the senses are a pathway to the metaphysical heart, right? So what are we seeing? What are we saying? What are we hearing? And especially sound. We forget the acoustic ability is actually really, really powerful.
Mm.
That's why the Quran recitation, brings tears to your eyes, right? So even what we're hearing, and are we putting ourselves in harm's way or are we removing ourselves? So you don't really need to see a lot of the content that's out there, right? So when you start removing those veils, then inshallah ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will start sending divine breezes in your direction. And then creativity will start. And then you have to apply the craft. So
Mm.
I think that's the first thing. It's like everyone can be creative, but you have to create the space. But if you're not, it's okay because you are a really good craftsperson. You do what you do. And that's beautiful as well.
Do you yourself have a technique or maybe like a pattern that you've come into now in order to, I'm sure you must have established some sort of rhythm to achieve both things, which is to minimize the distraction, right? And to kind of increase the creativity over time. Like can you share anything from your own personal practice that you think would be useful for people?
Yeah, look, I've been writing now for 15 years, 15 novels for 15 years now, alhamdulillah. And when I started, I really didn't know what I was doing. And it was like, I should just write anywhere and just, work on it and so on. And what I came to realize was that the more ritual that you have as a creative. Yeah. I've made my tea. It takes me 10 minutes to make a cup of tea. I have a certain ritual, cinnamon and cardamom and long and elachi, like cloves and, fennel seed, and then three types of tea leaves, all cooked properly and add the milk later on. So I don't eat tea in a minute. I take tea as 10 minutes. But what that does, that allows me to I'm moving towards getting into a deep zone.
Mm.
And as you're doing that, maybe you're doing some dhikr, at the same time, because there's an opportunity, because you're not doing anything else. You're not rushing, right? And just as when an athlete, before they run the 400 meters, you see them limbering up. It's a 45-second race, but you see them limbering up for like an hour, stretching, getting the body ready, and then they do the 45 seconds, right? Or that 100 meters, 10 seconds, whatever it might be. So in the same way, before you go into a deep zone, what rituals do you have to start to gravitate yourself into that so that when you arrive, you're there. Now, when I started in 2010, started writing novels, it would take me about 45 minutes to get into what psychologists call like flow state. Yeah. These days is about 5 minutes.
Mm.
Yeah. I'm because I've just been doing it for so long that I just get there. So again, it's nothing unique to me. Anyone could do it, but it's this gradual, incremental improvements daily, daily, daily. So I think that's number one is the rituals that you do to prepare yourself. Number two is your environment. So when you want to go into a creative zone, is it the same place, right? Are all my writing instruments ready? My papers, my, is my environment set in such a way that I have no excuse to get into it? So that's my personal space. Have I created that? And number three, of course, if you're living like most of us do with other people in the house or family or whatever, you know, you need to have an arrangement with them that this time at this day, it could be an hour, it could be an hour and a half, do not disturb, right? Now, there are some people who are fortunate that they have their own writing room. I don't. I share an office with my wife, right? So, but some people can't even do that. Some people can just have a living room, like dining table,
Mm.
take a chair on that. Some people can't even do that. They can just have a sofa somewhere. But whatever that might be, it might just be a cushion against the wall, but the people who are around you, they need to know that when Rehan or Iqbal is in that cushion or in that room for an hour and a half, do not disturb. So you need to have that arrangement. So I think all of those things, one is the ritual, second is your instruments around you to get to, to enable you to do what you need to do, right? And number three is the environment. And if you can work on those and like don't beat yourself up, it's going to take time. So go slowly, and as you get slowly, it just becomes like normal behavior.
Mm. And do you listen to anything while you write, or do you just write?
When I started in 2010, the whole process, I did have some kind of instrumental mood music in the on the
Mm.
background 'cause I felt that it would help me, and I think it probably did at the beginning, you know. And after three novels, I realized I didn't need it
Mm.
at that point. So people do ask about that, and is music helpful or not? I would say that if it has lyrics, then it's gonna trouble you, right? But if it's just something in the background, or you want to cancel noise, then yeah, it could help, push you to where you need to go.
Mm.
But once you get into it, you don't need it.
Sure, sure,
Yeah,
sure.
but it takes a few years.
Sure. What else then on attention, distraction? What else? I mean, other than is it all really? I mean, is the phone the main problem outside of the phone? You know, I mean, because nowadays when we think about distraction, that is literally all we think about, right? Or screens, generally speaking, the source of distraction, as if to say the price that no one was ever distracted. But I mean, to be honest, I'm actually struggling myself to even to think about, well, what else does distract me from things like when I want to get into a deep state, it's almost like that's pretty much it. But is there anything else people you think need to be cognizant about or be thinking about with regards to the whole distraction thing?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is look, the smartphones that we have all of us have with us. You have to realize that at the other end of your smartphone, there's billions of dollars of computer processing power that is essentially uh, directing you to pick up your phone, right? So it's game over, right? You got no chance, right? So if the phone is next to you, yeah, all the research shows you will pick it up.
I like here.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because there are billions of dollars of computer processing power. With some of the best behavioral psychologists in the world. Like, how can I make you pick up your phone, right? So the first thing you have to realize is that you've got no chance. So if you want to concentrate, the phone has to be outside your visual field. Yeah, all the researchers, you want to concentrate, remove the phone from your visual
It's
field.
not even visual, right? Because it's more like even accessible feel. Because in the pocket might not, meaning you might not see it in your pocket,
You
but
might not, yeah,
yeah,
but it might be if you feel it. Yeah, if it's in your pocket, you'll still feel like
just
Tim.
outside of your field. I think.
Yeah, just remove it, completely remove it, put it somewhere else, right? When you need to do that focus task, but you don't need to spend all day doing that
Mm.
focus task, right? So I think that's number one. Number two, I think what's also happened is because of the way the technology generally works on short reward cycles, notification, reward, notification, reward.
Mm.
What's happened is that we've uh, lost the ability to spend time with ourselves
Mm.
and just to reflect. and look out the window. I guess some of my best ideas is looking at the trees and the birds, because the mind is doing the heavy lifting. Yeah, you don't need to be thinking about it. It's working, right? Alhamdulillah. And so, and also just to read, because when you read a book, it's like 300 pages, right? The payoff is at the end of the book. But when you look at a TikTok video, it's like within a minute,
Mm,
right?
mm,
So the more you gravitate towards that, harder you'll feel to feel satisfaction from having a conversation with someone, listening to a podcast for an hour, right? Reading a book, right? Or just being with yourself. So I think the first thing you have to recognize is that, you have to remove that around you. And, my father always used to say that to avoid calamities and difficult times, you have to sometimes remove yourself from a situation. Like, don't be in that place.
mm.
Yeah, that something will befall you, right? And I think that's very much with the tech as well. Like, just remove it from you, and it'll allow you to focus on things. So I think that to your question, yes, it's technology, but it's also our behavior as humans. And we've just forgotten that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, look at the signs on the horizon, right? And we are not looking at the signs on the horizon. We're sort of,
Yeah, and also in your own selves, which is your point about spending time with yourself as well.
yeah.
To transition it to AI, the singularity, and all of these things that are going on right now, around which even existential threats are being spoken of in relation to the results of all of that. I mean, you mentioned the billions, going behind the smartphone usage. I mean, do you, um, in your research and understanding of all of what's going on now in both of these kind of realms, like sometimes there's this question about, is there a coordinated agenda around all of these things? Which I think, one could say, well, maybe it doesn't really matter whether there is or isn't, but we should just beware. But I think it's also useful to know because because that way it doesn't make it all seem as neutral as it otherwise seems to people. To your mind, is there an actual sort of deliberate agenda to achieve a certain whatever outcomes at the expense of many or most of human beings, which is what is the intent behind actually a lot of what has now gone on in terms of our smartphones and in terms of all this AI development, etc.
I think at the beginning, when the whole kind of tech field was taking off, there was a bit of naivety about, we're trying to, do good and save
Mm-hmm.
humanity. And we have to give people the benefit of the doubt. That's not tradition. Give people the benefit of the doubt. So we have to give them the benefit of the doubt. That's what they were trying to do. And then obviously there are unintended consequences, right? That suddenly happen. And then business models happen. And then you realize that for some of the big tech companies, that 96% plus of their revenue is from advertising, which basically means that this thing has to be addictive, right? So now, so I can't speak for what those decision makers at those tech companies do now, but that's the business model. Now, whether it's a more nefarious agenda, who knows, right? But the reality is that's where we're at. If you want to get into conspiracies and, oh, this is all Dajjalic and so, fine, you go there, you can do all that. It's okay. But it's more a question, what are you going to do about it,
Sure.
right? And you can do something about it. That's the whole point. You can do something about it.
So on this issue that we have discussed, which is to do with your protecting your attention in relation to the smartphone, I see that. But now, um, the all-pervasive nature of what seems to be coming
Yep.
in terms of the AI and everything else, I've said it a few times in previous conversations with others around the fact that I personally just don't see how you retain a sense of, like, collectively over time, retain a sense of normality, humanity, just the most essential, basic things when you've got this all-encompassing tidal wave of robotics. And not too long ago in the I think it was either Davos or something just prior to that, there's this talk of this fourth industrial revolution where the whole intent is to essentially fuse, if I get this right, the biological, the digital, and the kind of natural, say, right, like to bring all of these, fuse them all together. So it feels as though we're kind of coming to, I mean, but then people say, well, previously people have said that about all previous technologies, that that, oh, we won't survive this and what's going to happen. But I'm not talking just at the material level of people are going to lose jobs, which is obviously a big part of it, but it's more like existentially speaking. Is there a kind of resistance that needs to be starting now, because actually you just advance what's going on right now for the next even a couple of decades, and all of a sudden the threats are, yeah, just on a level which is completely different to maybe what we're anticipating.
Look, when it comes to technologies like AI, okay, first of all, there's obviously a difference between what we call artificial narrow intelligence, which is your chess playing algorithm, your vehicle, your chatbot, etc., and what people call artificial general intelligence, which is some kind of singularity super intelligence, the thing that scares people, Terminator, Skynet, Matrix, that kind of thing. That, according to most of the experts, is just way, 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 way in the future, right? Now, the people who are talking that up, right,
Hmm.
also have a philosophical position, which is transhumanism. We can get into that in a minute. And they also have a commercial position, right? Because they're very much about pushing that agenda for this thing they call the singularity. So it's not a done deal at all, right? And if you look at the people who are pushing this, and again, I won't mention names, but I
Hmm.
think they're all the big, the tech guys. Um, Now, they essentially, their view is that the human is hardware and software. And so when you die, there's an opportunity to download your software, your consciousness, right, which again is a huge subject in
Hmm.
itself, into a supercomputer. And then you can become part of that whole, part of the
Hmm.
singularity, right?
Hmm.
So that's a philosophical position because that denies the position of a soul, right? Whereas people who come from a faith tradition would say, actually, yes, we have body, but then you have a soul, and when you die, the soul returns to the creator. That's a different position, right?
Hmm. Oh, but just on that though,
Yeah.
I wonder how different those positions are, because when you said it the first time in terms of hardware and software, well, actually, that's not that kind of is our position as well. That there is like, but we're just calling the software the soul, and they're calling the software the consciousness. But
Yeah.
actually, in a sense, in some sense, what's the difference? Because actually, if someone says, "Do you believe consciousness survives death?" We'll say, "Yeah, consciousness survives death." We just call okay, we call it this.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
is I think isn't the difference simply in how they feel they can wield that essentially?
I think it's a bit more there, but
Okay.
one is that I think obviously in our view, our story is like a hopeful story in the sense that when you go from this world, there's a moment of transcendence where you return back to where you came from because the heart is constantly yearning to be with the beloved, right? And so it's a return journey, okay. Whereas with the people who are talking about the singularity, they're talking about essentially downloading your experiences, things that happen to you in this world and uploading it into this, you know, whatever it might be. Yeah. I think it is very different, right? It's very, because it's not secular. It's a secular. It's much more kind of linear in terms you go from here and then you become part of something, which actually is very much how the East sees things in a very circular way. And the West often sees things in a very kind of linear way. And that's maybe a different thing as well. But so I think, so they're very much pushing for that. Now, what's then at the root of that? Because if you look at, again, the people behind the singularity, behind big tech, these are the same guys investing in life extension projects, right? Whether it's cryogenics or whatever. They want to live forever. That's the bottom line,
Mm,
right?
mm,
They want to live forever. I don't know if you've read the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is one of the very first books, one of the very first stories found in cruciform script. And it's about a king called Gilgamesh in Mesopotamia, which is Iraq today. And it was written thousands of years ago. And he's this horrible king, but then he has a life-changing moment, and he decides to become magnanimous and benevolent and so on. And he then goes in search of, in the story, of this man called Utnapishtim. And Utnapishtim is the man who survived the flood. So whether that's referring to Prophet Noah or not, we're not sure. But he goes in search of Utnapishtim because he wants to learn the secret of immortality. But Utnapishtim has lived for more than 900 years. And he eventually finds him after his quest. And Utnapishtim says to him, you know what? It's just not worth it.
mm.
It's just not worth it, right? So,
So it'd be funny if that was Noah.
e- exactly, exactly. So now, I think the point here is that this craving to live forever is not a modern day phenomenon.
Mm,
It's there in the older stories.
mm.
And what we are seeing the same archetypal need by some people who've heavily invested in this world, who don't want to leave it. And now we're seeing it play out in this singularity project.
But the irony of it is, in a way, is that you do live forever anyway, kind of thing.
Of
Right.
course, but in a metaphysical
Yes.
form,
Yeah.
not in this. And the other irony is that they want to retain themselves as individuals, but when you go into a singularity, it's like the Borg collective from
Mm,
Star Trek
mm,
Next Generation. You just become part of like this amass, which also is an irony in itself. So I think there's this particular philosophical view of transhumanism, which is driving the agenda and it's almost like scaring everyone into this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is
yes.
going to
Yes.
happen.
Yes.
I definitely don't think it's inevitable. And if you look at the AI projects, especially in the corporate sphere, they're not paying back. They're not paying back. Yeah. What AI is very good at, and it's excellent at pattern recognition. You know, banking fraud. Detection of faults in an airline engine. Fantastic. Really good. Does a fantastic job. It's very good at prediction, right? So making predictions about your weather patterns, blah blah blah. Very good at that, and it's getting better at prescription, whereby turn left for this car, turn right for that car.
Mm-hmm.
That AI is phenomenal there, right? It's really really good. Recognition, prediction, prescription, and that solves for most organizations. That solves a lot of fundamental business requirements, right? Might be supply chain, it might be how to go to market. Great, but going from there into this other thing about it's gonna all these people are gonna lose their jobs and blah blah. Well, I personally I think it's heavily overblown.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's heavily overblown. But even if you were really worried about that,
Hmm.
okay, the advice I give my students that sort of when I teach postgrad courses is that look, if you want to be relevant in the future of work, then you have to be. If you try to be like a machine, then the machine will be always more efficient.
Hmm.
So you have to learn to be more human. And what does that mean? That means to be, have more empathy, have, self-efficacy. You can, organize yourself.
Hmm.
You have leadership skills. So you actually need to invest in soft skills, right? Because those are the ones that will really hold you in good stead. And one of the best ways to learn that is to read literature and it's all that other stuff as well.
And what about then also? I mean, I suppose it connects to what we were saying before. It's like better at being human, but also better at being yourself, in the sense that even in the pursuit of these kinds of skills, people can also sort of establish, almost play against themselves by trying to. There's an external assumed standard of what they need to,
Yeah.
what a person needs to achieve in order to survive, but actually they feel like they're working against themselves in reality in the process. So where do you stand on the issue of then? Where does authenticity come into it, essentially?
Well, all of us are unique, right? Everyone is unique, and the whole the tech economy is all about standardization. How can we standardize as many people and make them as predictable as possible? So if we fully embrace everything that's coming from the tech side, right, we will. That's what's going to happen. We're going to be very predictable. We're going to be very standardized. And right now, what we've seen is we've seen it at the level of the smartphone, but now you've got huge investments going into what's called neurotechnology, and neurotechnology is about again, some of the big tech companies putting into your earphones, right, an EEG monitor, which essentially monitors your brainwaves, alpha, beta, theta, delta, etc. So they can start to get inside your head. Because now, if you look at the brain patterning imaging data that's out there, and then whether you're doing a primary task, whether you're browsing on social media, and then you start putting this EEG data together, you can start to know what someone is doing at what point by looking inside their head. And so, for a lot of these tech companies, the holy grail is essentially your biology and your physiology,
Exactly.
because there's a universe inside of you. That we know this, right? The universe is inside of us, and we are a reflection of the universe is a reflection of us, right? So inside of you is an entire universe, and that's the data they want, right?
Mm.
So do you really want to give them that data and make yourself so predictable, or do you want to retain your fitra, which has come from God, right? It hasn't been shaped in Silicon Valley. It's a hum from God, right? And do you want to, you know, return to God with that fitra intact, or do you want to be stamped by made in Silicon Valley when you go back? That's a question that we all have to ask.
Before I transition, to the final part in terms of like we want to get more into sort of your writing process and what's been behind that. Like, do you mind speaking a little bit about like your own faith journey as well? Because I feel that there's a kind of parallel between uh, some of these things that we're talking about, your own realizations and thoughts around them, probably what's inspired you and kept you going, and what you're trying to bring out through your novels as well. And maybe you're trying to do that kind of, uh, implicitly, right, through the work that you're doing, but maybe a little bit explicitly for a second. Like, how do you think, how have you changed over time in terms of your assumptions, in terms of your understanding of faith, Islam, God, etc.? And what have been your kind of key influences?
So I grew up in this. I'm probably about 10 years older than you,
Mm,
at least, Iqbal. So I grew up in the 70s when we still had in London, and we still had, you know, well, I say we still had it, we have it now as well. Very much, National Front,
mm,
nationalism, skinheads, etc. And when I was at school, in primary school and secondary school, as an Asian growing up in South London, one thing that I learned, and we learned, was that to survive, you have to confederate with other people, with the West Indians, with the Jamaicans, with the Africans, with the Asians, right? So for me, one of my very early formative learning things was that if you try and survive by yourself, yeah, you're not going to make it, buddy. Yeah. You need to confederate, you need to ally. So my mindset from the beginning has been, so when I see diversity of culture, that to me is a way to know God. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, right, that's, he could have created us all the same, but he created us differently so that we get to know each other. And then later at university, and then we used to have we had something in the city of London called the City Circle, which was it was a charity which several of us kind of set up. And again, it was very pluralistic in the sense of very welcoming to people of our faith from different dispositions, different cultures, as well as people from other faiths as well. So my uh, early years and then later on have always been influenced by looking at the strands and the threads that bring us together at a fitra and human level.
mm,
So whether I'm speaking to Muslims in China or Indonesia or in Korea or in the Gambia or wherever, right? There's a uniqueness that brings us together, which is that journey to God. Okay, so I've that's really the key thing that's informed me, and also I think my parents were always very keen to say, look, you know, uh, try and learn things from different groups. There are
mm,
a lot of groups within this Muslim community. They're all well intentioned. They're not always doing very good, but learn what's good from them. So I guess my from the beginning has been the religious journey has been very informed by looking at what different people in different parts of the world are doing, but looking for the common threads that tie us together,
mhm,
and especially from a story perspective, because you see so many stories popping up. We talk about the flood in the Abrahamic traditions, right? The Aboriginal people in Australia, they have a flood story.
mm.
We just heard in Epic of Gilgamesh, there's a flood story, right? So there are these common stories that bring us together. I do feel that there's so much there. Even if you look actually, one I learned recently that the Celts, now there's very few Celtic people, Irish and a few others. Celtic legends. I've been reading Celtic legends these days, right? So my bedside table. Celtic legends and Hindu Sanskrit legends, they're almost the same.
Mm.
They have so many words which are the same because they come from the same kind of Indo-European languages that they go back. And so the Celts and the Indians have so much in common.
So the words, or as in the themes, you say?
Even the words. So I think, like, if I might be wrong here, but if you take like in Sanskrit, one of the words for knowledge is vid, like the Vedas,
Mm,
etc.
mm,
The vid, and in Celtic is ruid, right? Vid, ruid, and so in the druid
mm,
is the one who has knowledge,
mm,
right? So there's these all these like connections that you see, and you think, wow, Allah Subhanahu wa Taala has like put everything there. So that's been my religious journey, is to look for the things that bring us together and not look for divisions. So I'm a generally optimistic person. Like, whatever's happening in the world, I think, well, some of the greatest works in the Islamic tradition, whether it's reading the works of Rumi or you're looking at Al Ghazali, you don't realize that when you read them, that there was mass turmoil in the world at the time. The Mongols were coming through, all terrible things were happening. The community was completely, disunited. But when you read them, you don't sense it because they still did what they had to do. And that's my attitude. You can complain as much as you like, right? But just get on and do the work,
mm,
right? Because are you doing it for people or are you doing it for God? Because if
mm,
you're doing it for God, you'll still just do it,
mm,
irrespective of what the people say.
mm.
Yeah. And I do feel, without getting on a soapbox about it, but I do feel that there's a lot we can do even today, alhamdulillah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only thing that we've got is time, right? That's the only thing you've got, right? And somewhere in the world, there's a doorway for each of us. And we just don't know where that is, right? And when it's going to come, right? But when you realize that that doorway is waiting to open for you at some point, then that should give you the urgency to say, right, I need to do it. I need to make use of this next moment. Yeah. And be respectful of every other moment that comes.
And by that doorway, do you mean as in the doorway to a person achieving their full potential?
No, I mean the
Or,
doorway back to God.
oh, I see. Oh,
Right?
you're talking about that.
Yeah, I
No, I see.
somewhere that doorway is
I'm glad you made that more clear.
sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. That
Yeah.
that doorway is there somewhere, right?
Right.
So you don't know where it's gonna be.
Absolutely.
So, and you don't know when it's going to come. So, how can I then not use my time effectively? And what really taught me that, I got to say, was like, and this is the book that probably a lot of people when they were at university read, and it was the biography of Malcolm X. And I read that, I think, in 1989 when I was just going from A levels to first year at university. And I realized that here was a man who had such a difficult upbringing, right? But when he got into prison, like he educated himself and he valued time. And I thought to myself, do you know what? If he can do it,
Hmm.
yeah, then I should do it. Yeah, I should respect the time because that's the only currency that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. And if we don't, honor that, then really, then, we will be accountable.
Yeah. Dot dot dot. Yeah. Okay. Is the explanation that you've given as to the influences that you had when you were younger, that kind of quite open mindedness in terms of how you are reading different things, seeing different things, you're connecting different things. You call you've after having written some of your novels, you kind of set up this sort of storytelling, teaching, learning environment, which you call virtue based, right? You notably didn't call it Islamic storytelling or Muslim storytelling; it was virtue based. So it feels to me as though okay, that was a deliberate decision, and so maybe you can just speak about why do it that way? Because actually, a lot of creatives, founders, Muslims running different organizations and stuff, there's always this tension, right? How to brand something. We doing it, you make it look explicitly this way or that way. Are we doing it for our community? Are we doing it for wider society? But if we do it for wider society, our community won't get it. If we do it for our community, the wider, um, you've tried to sort of find a pathway maybe through that, because maybe you can speak about that, because I think that would be useful for people to understand as they're thinking about their own product services and
Yeah, yeah. So look, virtue is not a word that people use these days very often,
no.
right? But virtues, whether you look at the classic, Greek virtues, wisdom, courage, justice, temperance, or you look at the Islamic tradition or the Confucianist or Taoist or Hindu, whatever, you know, uh, across all faiths and traditional civilizations, virtues are very common, right? Whereas today we speak about values, right? And values can be monetized. Like, I value these shoes, I value these clothes, I value this car, I'm going to pay a higher. So we're actually speaking at the language of commerce when we talk about values. But when we speak about virtue, you're talking about something you can't, like,
Mm.
monetize.
That's a useful distinction.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So wisdom, courage, justice, temperance, you can't really monetize that. So what virtue does, first of all, using that as a language, it has a commonality across the world. And what virtue does, it helps me answer the question, what kind of person should I be? Yeah. Do I want to be someone who is courageous? Do I want to be someone who shows wisdom, right? Now, that can be applied in your home life. It can be applied in the working life. It can be applied in an entrepreneurial or writing perspective. And I feel that when you look at literature, if you look at the great novels, whether it's the Iliad, where it's, yes, this is a story, it's a story about many things, but clearly one of the stories is about fate and free will. You read the Brothers Karamazov, it's a story about, forgiveness, right? Giving people a second chance, right? And you read the classics, they always have a didactic element. There's an educative element there. And often it's about how does the character dig deep and find that sense of virtue in them. Whereas now, in the modern time, the word virtue has been completely removed. No one talks about it. So I feel like it's something that what we're doing, reviving a tradition there that traditional people are familiar with. Uh, traditional literature was like that. It spoke about virtues, whereas now stories are very much more nihilistic. Anything goes, right? Doesn't really matter. Or they're very much based on the principles of Descartes, which is very much that, don't let someone tell you what to believe. You make it up yourself,
Mm.
right? And Nietzsche and Descartes, the two philosophers who've really informed the modernist philosophy that we live in today. And all popular culture is rooted, if you go back, into either Nietzsche or into Descartes, right? Where that's not our tradition,
Mm.
right? So we have to, what's our tradition? Our tradition is virtue-based storytelling. So that was a deliberate reason. And also then it was something that people from any Abrahamic faith can feel like, yes, I can do this. Yeah. You don't have to come to, when I talk to my students, I say to them, one of the things about your sense of virtue, what kind of person should I be? That needs to be rooted into your belief. Yeah. And whatever you believe in whatever part of the world you come from, when you anchor yourself into belief, you are rooted. Because when a storm comes, the tree that's not rooted is going to get blown away. So what do you believe? And most people haven't asked that question. And especially in the corporate sector, right? They haven't asked themselves, what do I believe? Right. And so they're like a boat at sea without a rudder. And when you don't have a rudder in a boat, you have no direction. And you just go round and round and round and round. The late Clayton Christensen, who was a professor at Harvard, he contracted cancer and he died, prematurely. And one of the last piece he wrote was called "How Should I Examine My Life?" I think it was. So if anyone's in business who's listening to this, it's worth reading. He was a very pious Christian, and he's known for like several very famous books. Innovator's Dilemma, I think, is one of his books as well. And so, how should I measure my life, right? And it really asks that question, like, how will you measure your life? What are the key things, right? So I think in that way, that's why I chose the word virtue, because again, it's a uniting word,
Mm.
and it's a word that's not often used, but it has a lot of education elements in there as well.
Mm. Mm. What does somebody need to do uh, to explore whether they have a novel within them?
Do you have a novel within you, Iqbal?
You see, honestly, I don't think so. Like, I think I've got nonfiction books within me. I cannot see that I've got a fiction book within me. Like, I just can't see that. And I don't know, maybe that's like, I don't. So I thought about it, and then I've thought to myself, should I be like, is that like what's wrong with me, sort of thing, right? Like, because but it's often said, I'm yeah, okay, let's do this therapy session now. That's a good idea. So I think generally speaking, when I want to, like, a lot of my work and a lot of my life has been about making a point. And despite all the advice that says the best way to make a point is tell a story, I can't do it. Like, I can't, like, meaning it's not natural to me. I can kind of force myself, but it's not. I know, like, there's many speakers, many effective speakers. And frankly, even in the way I receive information, it's like if I'm receiving it through the story, I feel like in some way suspicious of it in a way. It's like, maybe I've allowed my sort of, the rash. Like, it's not. I don't. It's not that I'm not a feeling person. Instead, I feel like I'm high on this intuition type of thing, meaning it's got to land in my heart, right? Um, but stories, when I kind of do watch stories and stuff, they land in my heart. But it's almost, I don't know. Like, I feel to make a point or to illustrate a principle, I feel I'm more on the principles logic, maybe more of it, and rather than I'm able to appreciate stories, but I don't think I'm able to tell them very well, or that doesn't feel natural to me. So yeah, what do I do about that?
Well, look, I think the first thing is as humans, we uh, subsume, we imbue stories very naturally because I think it's just not fit. It's
Mm.
just, we are, you, I, all the other humans on the planet, we are currently in the greatest story of our life. We are journeying back to God.
Mhm.
We're wayfaring.
Mm.
We're on the path of Suluk. There is no greater journey than that,
Mm.
right? The return to the beloved. So we are naturally in the story.
Sure.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to being able to tell a story, that's like, I think it's like saying to someone, you know, everyone has an instrument that they should learn in them. It's unfair. No, people, not everyone has a novel in them. And this, I think, is a modern day phenomena of the bucket list. I need to have climbed Kilimanjaro.
Sure.
I need to have done a triathlon. I need to have written a book. I need, why? Why? Again, it's the reign of quantity,
Mm.
right? I want to show I did this, 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 this. So you go through your whole life, tick that off my list, tick that off my list. You'll never be satisfied. You'll never be satisfied. Rather, be comfortable in what you're good at. Focus on that. Let the musicians create the music. Let Sami Yusuf do his stuff. Let Yusuf Islam do his stuff. Let the writers do their stuff. Let the business people do it. Let people do what they do. You don't have to do it.
Mm.
So you don't need to have a guilt complex.
No, sure.
I didn't write a book. Yeah. Now I know a lot of people who write for themselves only
Mm.
because the practice of getting your thoughts on paper is a very therapeutic practice, right?
Mm.
Alhamdulillah, which is great. But we live in a world where everyone wants to blog and and tell everyone about what they you don't need to do that, right? You are writing for yourself, your own reflection. Maybe you give your diaries to your children, right?
Mm.
They keep that. Alhamdulillah, that's fine.
Mm.
Yeah. But everyone wants to put everything out there. You don't need to do that.
Mm.
Yeah, so I think it's unfair to say to people that everyone's got a book in them because writing a novel is extremely hard, right? I teach a course, as you mentioned earlier, and what a lot of the people who do the course realize is that, oh,
Mm.
crap.
Mm.
You mean I have to change my lifestyle to write this thing, and I have to do all of these practices and these rituals and this, yes, it's like saying to someone, okay, you're going to learn to play the cello or the piano, and you can do it in a month. No, you can't.
Mm.
Yeah, it's going to take you a decade, and then maybe you might get to grade 4 or something at that time, right? Yeah. So I think it's extremely unfair to put that pressure on people and to say you have a book in them. You don't need to have a book in you, right? You need to have essentially a story that you may convey just through your presence and your silence and your decorum and your manner, your akhlaq. That might be your story because the people who are around you, who see you, they remember you for that. Like some of the greatest teachers I've met, I didn't have to speak very much to them. I just had to be in their presence, right? And that was enough. Like the nazar, that was it. That was enough. It was enough, really.
Just on this, I wonder, mention something which I've never said actually before, but uh, it often comes back to me. So after graduating, I studied in Jordan for a bit, and for about 8-9 months, and there was I was finishing there. I was finishing my memorization of the Quran, and then there was like a sort of celebratory kind of party, or whatever. That was the only time I've actually sacrificed a sheep with my own hand. Terrifying experience, I can tell you. Um, and then we ate from that, and the whole kind of area sort of came together.
Yeah.
And there was a man, an old man, in the corner of the room, um, who who's like our eyes met basically for about 5 seconds, 10 seconds max, and uh, he that gaze I've never forgotten. And like I don't really. I think I learned afterwards that he was somebody who was considered to be like a very uh, just a pious kind of saintly type person. But I have no idea who his name is, what his name was, right? Like nothing really. But like I always remember that, and I think about just in relation to what you said, right, which is that this, and I don't know, there was almost like a knowing in that, and I don't know exactly what I'm concluding from it precisely, but it was just illustrative of what you've just mentioned, which is actually like the power of like presence, basically, and somehow it kind of whenever that comes to my mind, in a weird kind of way, it grounds me somehow. It's just so strange. And it obviously reminds me of that moment, which was like obviously an important moment for me in my life and stuff. But it's just weird how it then got linked just to that very passing sort of yeah.
Because that's what you
Yeah.
probably needed at that moment.
Having fun.
And so, and I'm sure you've had this experience, right? You said something to someone, and for you it was no big deal, but for them that was the most important thing they heard that week.
Yes, yes.
And afterwards they say, "Do you remember you told me that, Iqbal?" And you
Yeah,
say,
yeah.
"Oh,
Yeah, I've had that a lot over.
and it's, but because that was, God basically conveying through you as a conduit,
Mm,
right, to them
mm,
what they needed to hear. And I think that's certainly in our own kind of, my wife and I, as a family, in our own spiritual journey, if you look at it, you know, we were searching for good teachers for like 20 years, like literally for 20 years, right? Um, but there are people out there. You just have to find them. Like that's a quest. Like anyone's in, like I love storytelling. You are on this quest to find good people.
So that just that then, so and to then connect it back to your novels, like
Yeah.
Is that a part of some of your novels, or all of them, like in terms of the quest for a mentor, essentially?
No, I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
But my stories do have mentors,
Yeah.
like the current one, which is a collaboration with Peter Gould, who's been on
Yeah.
your podcast before, Tales of Khayaal, and in that there is a mentor-mentee relationship. My earlier series, which was an Ottoman series set in the 1591 Ottoman Empire in Tudor England, called A Tudor Turk, there was like an older mentor, like a Bosnian janissary officer, and there were two younger characters as
Mm,
well.
mm,
So there was a kind of mentor mentee, but that's never been like a key, fulcrum in the story.
yeah.
But it's been more there because again, for me, when I started working in the corporate sector back in 1993, I was very fortunate in my first year in the office I was in. There was an old guy there who was a real master at what he did, and it reminded me of the apprentice master relationship. And I always found that in my corporate career that I always looked for people who had that mastery and I would work with them. And so later, when I was in the corporate sector and I was in my early 50s, I would ensure that the staff who worked for me who were junior were teamed up with masters. So I think there's a lot to be said about that. But of course, sometimes your mentor might be your same age, right? Which is fine, but they've just been on a journey which you want to go through, right? And just as you go for a personal trainer, you use them because they've done what you want to do. So on the spiritual journey, you're trying to find someone who basically who's been there, who's done it, right? And who's not going to necessarily, tell you do this, do that, but often it's just their presence,
Mm,
and your heart starts to gravitate towards the Prophet ﷺ, your heart starts to gravitate towards God, and then you're with the right teacher because they're not telling you do this and do that no, it's just their presence, right?
mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, so what are the fundamental messages you're trying to get across through your stories, through your novels?
Yeah, generally, like each novel has a different kind of message, if you like, very subtle. And I think that the great novels that I'm not at all professing mine are great, but if you look at the great novels, they are architected in four ways, right? So you have the literal level, the plot, A happened, B happened. You have the allegorical level. What's the writer really saying? Easy example, Animal Farm, George Orwell, about animals taking over a farm. Actually, it's about the Russian Revolution and what went wrong. There's the allegorical message. So that's the second layer of the novel, right? So what's the writer really saying? Third layer of the novel is the moral dilemma. So you put characters into difficult circumstances and you see what they do. And the moral question is what? What should I do? Yeah. Whether it's in a home, whether it's in a workplace, should I show generosity and benevolence to this employee who just lost us $1 million, or what do I do? That's the moral question. What should I do? And often it's the gray areas, right? It's like, well, this could be right, but this could be right as well. So in a novel, that's the third layer. You put your characters into moral dilemmas. So you have literal, allegorical, moral, and then the fourth layer is the spiritual kind of eschatological arc of the story, which is really getting at the essence of what are you saying. And obviously, as you go down the layers, it gets more subtle. So people will, like maybe a 14, 15-year-old will read my novels and they'll write to me and say, that was so exciting. It was really amazing. Yeah. Whereas, a few of my friends who are scholars, they'll write to me and say, oh, Rehan, you were writing about this.
Mm,
Yes. So, for example, and as an example, one of my novels, Tomb of Empires, that's set in 90 BC, so 90 years before Christianity, and it's set in Palestine, Syria, and Jordan of that time. Yes, it's a great story about epic battles and heroism and romance, all the things that you'd have ingredients in a story, right? But it's about marifa. It's about how do I know God? And where I'm driving the story towards, obviously in extremely subtle way, is that the human heart has the ability to manifest all the names of God, right? Whereas his creation, the insects and the bees, they can manifest certain attributes of God, but only the human heart can manifest all the attributes of God. And obviously, the Prophet ﷺ is the one who, demonstrated the 99 names of God plus all the names that we don't know about, right? So that's what that story is about. Like, if you want to know God, you know him through his names, and you know him through his names by manifesting the names into your heart and then becoming that, right? As sub creation, obviously not as creation, as sub creation. So that's what that story is about. So I said, one of my friends who's a scholar, he said to me, "That's what you're writing about." I said, "Yeah," but that's like only a few people are going to get that, but that's okay
Hmm.
because maybe when they read it a second time, they'll get it. Uh, Tales of Khayaal, again, likewise, that's got a similar, kind of spiritual message, which I'd let the readers figure it out. I'm not going
Sure.
to tell them
Yeah,
what
yeah,
it is.
that's fair.
So I think the essence is there. It's hidden, like it should be, and it requires some work to find it out. But hopefully, when people find it, then inshallah, it's fulfilling.
Mhm. And Tales of Khayaal is volume one that has come out. Um, it's volume one of.
Inshallah, five,
Okay.
maybe seven. So it's basically the first of a series. The second one, inshallah, should be out after this summer. Inshallah, it's in a good place, so it's coming out. Inshallah.
Okay. Okay. Great. Great. So yeah, you've got your work cut out for you then. Your life plan is very clear for the.
We don't know what's going to happen
No,
next week as
absolutely.
well.
Yeah. But to the extent that you are intending it. But yeah.
Inshallah.
Anything that we have not talked about that we should have, or anything that you want to say that you haven't yet.
No, I think it's been, alhamdulillah, really great. It's always great speaking to you. And mashallah, the stuff that you're doing. And, you've always been following all your stuff since you were very young. And mashallah, it's, you're a real role model for a lot of people. So alhamdulillah.
No,
Just
well,
keep doing what you're doing.
I encourage everyone not to make the mistake of regarding you as a role model in any way. But no, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And you've certainly been a role model for me. And I've really been really excited by the journey that you've been on. And I really hope it reaches a lot of people, touches lots of hearts, so that it goes broad and deep, which I know is where you want it to go in the end.
Inshallah.
Yeah, great. No, thank you so much. Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.